Hey, Adventure Machines subscribers, another adventure time. It's about 30 degrees out in the shop, so I've got necessary accoutrements on to stay warm until the heaters catch up. Got some bits and bobs in the mail here recently. Got this overflow tank that's made out of aluminum, which they painted with silver paint, and I'm going to have to take that paint off so that then I can weld on these bung fittings. These are AN6 fittings, these three guys here. So the idea is, come over here, this is going to sit in here, kind of in that general vicinity. Build a bracket so it mounts. Possibly on the other side, but probably right here. And this gray hose right here, which comes out of the number 5, the area next to the number 5 cylinder exhaust port. And there's another one right there that I haven't built a hose for yet. They'll come into this tank, and so 2 hoses coming into the tank, and then there will be a single hose coming out of it, running back here where this fitting's at. Not going to use that press fitting, but anyway, back to underside of the thermostat. The other thing that I worked on here recently is I built my brackets to hold the fuel rail. They're a bit overkill, but I don't want that coming off. This fuel all over here is a very bad thing. Got some PTFE lined hose for all the flexible fuel lines. Put this fitting on. This was my second attempt. This stuff is a real pain to deal with. I actually failed my first fitting in assembling it and figured things out, and so thankfully I had a second one. So what else? There's a bunch of gray hoses down here. This is associated with the manifold pressure, and this solenoid down here is for the wastegate control. So those lines will come back and connect to the wastegate back here. Need to build a bracket for the solenoid, and then eventually run the wiring harness down there. Added a little bracket right here for the throttle cable, so the throttle cable is going to run back here and then just kind of rests in there, and then that hole right there is where the cable goes through. Still got to drill the manifold, tap a couple holes for some of the other reference points. Some of them will get blocked. I'm just going to punch them in there and use them if I need them, don't if I don't. That one's for the brake booster, and I've got preliminarily, I've got the heat shield in here. You can kind of see down in there, there's one of the fittings that I've made. I got to try and figure out how I'm going to actually weld it, or get it into position and then weld it. So that's the stock turbo heat shield. So I'm adapting it to this custom intake manifold. What else we got going on? Over here, I built a custom manifold where the oil pressure line comes out of the block and runs up over here, and then so here's the OEM pressure sensor. I'm going to put a gauge pretty much right in this area, so when the engine's running, you know exactly what oil pressure it's got. Got one of the ports that's blocked right now. And then this right here is an AN, and it's tight, but basically it's got a cap on an AN4 fitting. And I'm going to use this to prime the oil system before I do my first cold start. And eventually maybe this will be where an AccuSump ports in. I'm not exactly sure yet. Here's one of the pressure sensors that I recently picked up. This one will go down into one of the available ports. I need to figure out how this is all going to fit. Eventually what the intent is that the ECU will be aware of all the critical pressures. So oil pressure is going to be one that's going to go into the fuel pressure regulator, which is where this current fitting is, but it'll go right there. And there's I was contemplating putting it in that tank as well, so I know what system pressure looks like. That's another thing that we'll add. But stripped all the various layers of paint off of the driver's side hinge, hood hinge. It's in pretty decent shape. It was a little tweaked, and so I had to straighten it out. One of the major tasks for today is I'm going to take this coil of stainless 3/8 tubing and hopefully bed it into a shape that will go from the fuel pump location all the way down along the frame rail and come up here. I'm going to replace this line right here. This is 5/16. So the pressure side will be 3/8 and the return will be 5/16, at least that's the current plan. If I've got enough of the 3/8 tubing, I'll make them both 3/8. So that's one thing that's happening over there. Seriously contemplating replacing the wiring that goes back to the fuel pump with larger wire. This is some wire that came out of an aircraft. So this is all high grade insulation, and it's a 12 gauge wire. So I was contemplating running a replacement replacement large wire back to the fuel pump so that it has as much voltage and current carrying capability as possible. Right. Been working on the wiper motor setup. This is the bracket that was in the car, and I cleaned all of the extra paint off of it as well, and then this lower section was had some surface rust on it, so I just decided to paint that section, but the rest of it is still has the zinc plating on it. This is a relay box that came out of a 300ZX. I'm contemplating modifying it and using it inside the engine bay to drive things like the fans, the wiper motor. I was thinking to run the fuel pump there, but it's doesn't have to be that. And then the headlights. So I may switch both the high and the low through this. So this will end up being on the passenger side inner fender well. And I went through and just cleaned everything up and greased all of the components. So this is part of the wiper assembly. So this has all been disassembled, cleaned, lubed, and put back together. Got my cams back out. I've got a hard decision to make. So this is a K-cam, which is mystery. There's no references to what it is, but it kind of doesn't matter because I'm contemplating sending this off to ISKI to have it reground. This is the 260 grind that was in the car. What's in it now is brand new comp cams, cam that's never been ran, and I coated it and a bunch of other stuff, but it's a CWC core, and pretty much everybody says that they're notorious for failing, and so I'm nervous about that. Hiding under here is my attempt to get my stripper to get this paint off, and I'm actually rather impressed with whatever this paint is or was. This stuff is burly. It does not want to come off, but I will persist. So that's one of the other things that needs to happen. Bench is kind of a mess. One of the other things that I got to do is I got to get this motorcycle back together and ready to go. It's just a chain and sprockets. So I went with a DID ZV-MX. This is rated for a 1300cc application. This engine I've had out and completely apart for this customer. It was an early 04 and it had head gasket problems. But so new countershaft sprocket, new rear drive sprocket. Also, one of the tricks is you drill a small hole just in front of this casting that goes inside the arm, so that the swing arm leg will drain water because it collects water. And then what ends up happening is that this jack bolt becomes seized in this section, and you can't get it out. And if you can get it out, if it's seized, it'll take the threads with it. So in this situation, they needed attention. But the cool thing is that if you drill this hole, you can put some penetrant, an extension, and spray some penetrant up on the back sides of the threads, so that when you start bringing it out, it doesn't gall the aluminum, because this is a stainless piece. So anyway, I did that on this, took that all apart, chased the threads, greased it with marine grade grease, cleaned all of the stuff off so that this slides in and out nice and clean and easy. Right. So there you have it. I got plenty to do today. Got my new phone, which I'm kind of excited about, trying to get used to its focal length. So some of my shots are probably really super close, and you're probably seeing me really super close, so apologize for that. So yeah, so enjoy.